Okay, hello everyone. Depending on where you are in the world, I want to wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. I am Pamela Nadler Emmerich, the president of the American Friends of the Hebrew University, and it is my honor and my privilege to welcome you all to the Hebrew University's webinar, featuring three distinguished members of the university's Faculty of Law, who will discuss the important work that they are doing in the fight for the safe return of the Israeli hostages who were brutally abducted by Hamas 4 weeks ago. This webinar is being co-sponsored by the American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, an organization that does amazing work for advocating for issues affecting the Jewish community, and an organization that happens to also be near and dear to my heart, on whose board I served several decades ago. But before we begin, I would like to introduce our moderator, Professor Tomer Brody, who will then introduce the other speakers. Tomer is the Dean of the Hebrew University's Faculty of Law and is the Bessie and Michael Greenblatt Chair in Public and International Law at the Faculty of Law and Department of International Relations, where he specializes in not only public international law, but international economic law, particularly international trade and investment, human rights, dispute settlements, and the development and cultural diversity. He has served as the academic director of the Minerva Center for Human Rights at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He is an editor of the Journal of International Dispute Settlement and a general editor of the Cambridge University Book Press book series on international and economic law. So please, Tomer, I'll give the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Yes, this is it's great to have an opportunity to engage and discuss with what seems to be quite a large group of friends and supporters from around the world, North America, Europe, and other places. I'll introduce Yuval more, and thank you for the generous introduction. I'll introduce Yuval and Shiran, who are also great friends and colleagues, more briefly and off the cuff. And I'll also say a few words about the way we are functioning and continuing to function as a university, as in a faculty, the law faculty at least, which is where my focus is as dean. Yuval Shani, Professor Yuval Shani, I'd say one of the most prominent international lawyers, certainly in international human rights and international humanitarian law. So really on the right field to discuss many of the issues that we will be discussing now. Former member of the Human Rights, the UN Human Rights Committee, also former former dean, and also former head of the Minerva Center for Human Rights at the Hebrew University. I'd say needs no introduction, but certainly an authority on many of the issues that we'll be discussing this evening. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty dark outside. So yes, where we are in the world, Shiran, Yuval, and I, then dark in terms of illumination, but also in other senses. Dr. Shiran Reichenberg is the academic head, or the head of the Clinical Legal Education Center at the law faculty, an expert on children's rights, and both Yuval and Shiran, and to a lesser extent myself also, we've been involved in trying to at least address the international legal issues that emerge from this pressing issue of the hostages. And much as we're accustomed to extraordinary times, these are especially extraordinary times. Nothing, I think, could prepare us as a nation, as people, and also as a university for the depth the atrocities of October 7th. So maybe for this audience, I'll just say a few words about how we've been coping with, as an academic community, setting international law aside. This is another issue, but mainly also to speak to you as friends of the Hebrew University. October 7th, it seems almost like a lifetime ago. We were entirely planned to begin our academic orientation. The studies were supposed to begin on the 15th of October. Instead, of course, everything has gone awry. But we are in close contact with all our students, or trying to be in close contact with all our students. We have about 40%, at least the law faculty, who have been called up. This varies between different faculties, but we know for a fact that we have about 40% who've been called up for reserve duty. We've also have alumni who were murdered on October 7th. Of course, in the various circles of families, then everyone has been impacted. So there is also this concern about, at least my concern, how do we get back to classrooms? Hopefully sooner rather than later, but it's very, very difficult to address that. But at the same time, there's been significant work to do whatever is possible. Support for students, psychological, but also financial. And Pamela might address that later on as well, because we certainly have to support students whose really their life plan has been disrupted significantly. Those who haven't been called up, then there are many students are involved in volunteer work, whether it's in the fields and agriculture, not just students, but also faculty. And then there's also the support that the clinics have been providing. And I think that is what Yuval, maybe more on the international side, providing the legal framework, and Shiran, who is not an international lawyer, but certainly has been very, very deeply involved in what we're doing. So Yuval, we'll take it from there.
Yes, thank you, Tomer, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in to this conversation. It is very important for us that we have your support. I've been, I should say, I'm joining this talk from London, where I'm currently spending the year. I'm co-directing an academic program which Hebrew University runs with King's College, Georgetown Law Center, and 10 other law schools from around the world. And the terrible events of October 7 have hit me, so to speak, here. And also the 12 students who are Israeli Hebrew youth students who are in the program, some of whom also had to return to Israel to enlist. Some went back to be with their families and are now mostly back in London. Some unfortunately had to go and attend funerals of close friends and relatives. So we've been monitoring the situation very closely from here. And of course, our hearts are with everyone in Israel. In my case, I also have a daughter in uniform, which makes it, of course, also particularly worrisome. In terms of switching to the professional contribution, the Center for Clinical Legal Education intervened very quickly here in this situation. And the reason why we could do that is that unfortunately we already have gathered some experience, actually unique experience, in dealing with situations of this nature, although of course not at this magnitude. We have been represented in the last more than 4 years, the families of the 4 Israeli hostages who were held in Gaza since the year 2014 and 2015. These are Avera Mengistu, Hisham El Said, Oron Shaul, and Hadar Goldin, and we have been representing their families before a host of UN bodies in the last 4 to 5 years. We have submitted petitions on their behalf. Only last July, we were with the 4 families in Geneva, and we have met with the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We have met with the Vice President of the International Committee of the Red Cross. We have held a public event at the Human Rights Council. We have met with the US Ambassador to the Human Rights Council. So unfortunately, we already knew the drill of how do you go about operationalizing international law and all sorts of international human rights mechanisms in such a calamitous situation. We have our experience with the 4 families has illustrated that although human rights and international law are unfortunately not the key to releasing the victims of these violations, they are an important component in keeping the issue very high on the international agenda, and also in framing this tragedy as a human rights and an international law violation. Now, as I said before, the terrible events of October 7, and especially the kidnapping of more than 240 individuals from Israel are a tragedy of a wholly different magnitude in terms of scale and scope, something which is really unprecedented. What we did is we offered our services very quickly after the events became apparent, after the magnitude of the event became apparent. We have established contact with the forum that is coordinating the needs and the advocacy of the vast majority of the families of the hostages. Shiran will speak more specifically on the legal interventions that we have done on their behalf, as well as on behalf of a smaller group of families of children who are held hostages in Gaza. Some of our work, and indeed this is the part in which Tomer and I were, who are both of us international lawyers, although also with the help of Professor Yael Ronen, who's a research fellow in the Minerva Center, is also an expert in international law, and has been advising the clinical center with all of its operations throughout the year. What we have done was to articulate the legal positions that underlie our interventions, and that we have done through the issuance of 2 public letters that detail and describe the legal situation. These public letters, which I will immediately share with you on the chat, and feel free to circulate it further onwards, have been signed by hundreds of international law experts from around the world, including, I would note, many experts who normally do not associate their names with pro-Israeli causes, but I think felt that this is a situation which is different, and this is a situation whose humanitarian dimensions are unique and exceptional. Our legal analysis is mostly focused on the hostage-taking dimension of the atrocities of October 7, because this is effectively these are the clients that we represent in the clinic. The letters do, however, qualify the attacks in themselves as very serious violations of international law. And specifically as war crimes, crimes against humanity, and even possibly acts of genocide. Now, with regard to the hostages, the first letter on the hostages does qualify the taking of hostages as a serious violation of the laws of war, of international humanitarian law. and effectively as a war crime. International law strictly prohibits the taking of hostages, be they civilians or even be they military personnel. And it is quite clear that the taking of hostages by Hamas has been a war crime. We also have established the proposition that the taking of hostages is also a very serious human rights violation, that because of its scope and scale, specifically the tests in international law are widespread and systematic attack on a civilian population, would constitute also another international crime, and that is a crime against humanity. Specifically, the crime against humanity that is implicated here is the crime of enforced disappearance, which is the removal of individuals from the protection of the law, involving a deprivation of their liberty without providing information about their fate and whereabouts. The result of this legal analysis, that the fact that you have so clear and so serious violations of international law, is that all states have the responsibility to assist Israel in demanding the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages, and in the meantime, in demanding that they would be, until released, humanely treated, and also obtain access to visits by the International Committee of the Red Cross. The children's letter also discusses the specific human rights violations of the rights of the child under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also addresses the specific pain and suffering the children who have been detached from their families undergo, which constitutes a form of torture under international law. I should say that another one of our colleagues, Professor Tali Gal, who is also a Minerva shareholder for children and youth rights, has also compiled another public letter with not only lawyers, but also experts in child development and child welfare that addresses the specific danger and risk that is attended to the children, to the 31 children who are held in captivity by Hamas. The next stages of our involvement are now that the cases, the motions have been put forward, the cases have been initiated, and Shiran will explain what we have done, is to follow up on these interventions, hold meetings and hold discussions with government officials in Israel and outside Israel, also work with international organizations, including the ICRC, and also continue and raise the violations and the plight of the hostages in a variety of public fora. Us international lawyers, I should say, are also increasingly drawn to engaging in public debates, specifically in academic circles, concerning issues relating to the war taking place now in Gaza, and dealing with some of the criticism that is directed against Israel, which is sometimes misinformed, misguided, and politicized. So I will stop here, and I will turn to Shiran to say a few words about the specific interventions by the Center for Clinical Legal Education.
Thank you. Shiran, go ahead. And there's also the individual, and we're sort of moving to a stage that there will also be individual petitions.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, and hello. Thank you for coming, and good time of the day wherever you are. As Tomer said, my name is Shiran Reichenberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Legal Clinics at the Faculty of Law. And I will speak about everything Yuval said, but before that, I want to say some words about the work of the clinics that has been going on so far. So a few days after the October 7th, we at the Clinical Legal Education Center thought what we can do as human rights lawyer in this situation, which was and still unprecedented in so many aspects, but legally, we start working in two different clinical legal ways. One is the international law aspects, which I will elaborate on. As Tomer said, I do want to say a little a few words about our legal hotline that we started, which is a War Room Facebook page to assist different issues of social rights. And this is important to put out because this page is operated by our students from past and upcoming academic year under our supervision of the clinical lawyers. And all the students who volunteer there at the War Room go through legal instruction, basic training on relevant legal issues before they join. And each response they write is supervised and authorized by us, because it's important to say that besides the International Human Rights Act that need to be done, there are a lot of basic rights here that we are also dealing with. So we provide immediate legal advice and also information on relevant useful links on different legal issues, such as compensation entitlement for the bereaved families and those injured, benefits for people who have been evacuated from their homes, rights of people unable to work, employees who've been put out on unpaid leave, etc. And if we'll have time, I'll elaborate more about those issues later. The other aspect is what Yuval and Tomer spoke about, is the International Human Rights Clinic that has been working really hard since it all began. We addressed different UN agencies. When the Hostage and Missing Families Forum was established, we contacted them and started representing them, applying different working groups, reporters, and committees of the UN, urging them to act and pressure to release all hostages and to reveal and clarify the fate and whereabouts of every person abducted by Hamas or any other organization within the Gaza Strip. We also addressed, as Yuval said, the Red Cross, and we were involved in other petitions and with other NGOs, for example, like Yuval said, regarding the children's rights and people with disabilities, all of those actions trying to use the international law tools to pressure the countries to take action in this matter. So far, we applied for 7 different working groups, reporters, and committees. And now we are starting to apply in the name of individual families through the Hostage Forum for the working group of enforced and involuntary disappearance. So they will be obliged to contact Hamas for information about the missing people. We also operated a Q&A page for the forum website. I will put it on later, maybe in the chat. And it's regarding different aspects of international issues, international law issues, such as is the taking of hostages of civilians, the violation of laws of armed conflict, is it a war crime, or is it a crime against humanity? All of those are relevant questions, and the answer is yes, in short, and you can read a detailed explanation on the website. And this is part of the Family Forum website. Also, on the last Friday, we were present at a press conference of the Hostage Families Forum, which focused on international law obligations, which were presented by Aaron Barak and Dorit Beinish, who are former presidents of the Supreme Court in Israel. There were some international law experts like Professor Eyal Ben-Benishti, who is part of our law faculty and also an academic director in the clinics. And there were also a representative of the families. One of them was Yoni, a father whose wife, 2 young girls, and his mother-in-law were abducted to Gaza. And for me, hearing him and looking at his eyes was almost unbearable. I can't even start to imagine what he's going through, and I will do everything I can to help bringing his family back. And I also want to say, on a personal level, that the past months was hard in a way that there are literally no words to describe. Beside the horrors that happened on the 7th of October, every day since then revealed more difficulties. A war started, and our daily life has changed to what we call emergency routine, but it's not something you want to get used to. And as a clinical teacher and as the clinical executive director, being able to assist those who literally lost everything, is a huge privilege we at the Hebrew University Legal Clinics have, and we will continue to do that with our staff and students. So I will go now to the questions, right, Tomer?
Thank you, Shiran. I mean, maybe just add a few, food for thought, as if there isn't enough. First of all, I'd like to really thank those foundations who have been supporting specifically the International Human Rights Law Clinic, but also other clinics. So this is the Friedgal Transitional Justice. It seems almost a distant dream now, but we're not losing hope in terms of addressing intercommunal issues and hopes, as I said, and also the Knapp Foundation, but lots of other foundations that have been supporting the clinics in general. Maybe one thing to emphasize is that the work that the clinics are doing now are all volunteer work. Right? This is, I think it's really important to acknowledge that because the academic year hasn't begun. So students from London working with Yuval and with Shiran and with Yael Ronen on the hostages issues. It's entirely that is a way that they can express themselves and also feel that they're supporting, not just feel, they are supporting. But also in the situation room that you mentioned. This is all volunteer work. Another point that might be interesting to discuss here in this forum, or maybe for another opportunity, maybe next week or later on, is our concern with BDS, boycott, divestment, and this is something that we're not working on in the clinics, but it's certainly at the top of mind. Campus anti-Semitism. Yuval is probably facing that also in the UK, but we are very much aware of the pressures that our students and others are facing in the United States, in Ivy League universities, and so on. But anyway, I'm just floating a few issues that I know that people are concerned with. So Q&A. Happy to take questions and to moderate in that respect.
Okay, I have a question here from Philip Gartenberg. Hello, Phil. He asks, do we know how many IDF members are being held hostage? And is there any difference in their legal status as compared to the other hostages?
Well, I can answer the second part. Maybe Shiran can answer the first part. I will just say that it is a sensitive issue, and it's not numbers generally concerning the hostages and their exact qualification as soldiers or civilians have not been officially released. I think there may be a concern that once an hostage becomes identified as a soldier, if this is not obvious, this could complicate his or her situation. So this is also a consideration that in our practical work in the clinics we are dealing. But maybe Shiran has more to add. I will just say that the vast majority are not soldiers. This is obvious. With regard to the legal qualification, there is no difference in the legal qualification between soldiers and civilians in the specific case at hand. First, Hamas is not a recognized military, and therefore doesn't have a legal right to hold individuals as prisoners of war. This is different from a regular army of a nation state. And in any event, Hamas has been quite clear that it is holding all of these individuals, both the soldiers and the civilians, as bargaining chips. And this is unlawful under international law. This is effectively hostage taking. and that doesn't, and this norm as well doesn't distinguish between soldiers and civilians.
Can I just add to that? Maybe we can send a link to the Q&A that is on.
Yes, I put it on the chat for
forum.
Francine to forward it to everyone. I can put it on the Q&A here in a minute. I will just say that what we know, what was reported, that there are 240 reported hostages, which as far as we know is not all the people who've been taken hostages. In this number, we know of 40 children under the age of 18 and approximately 40 foreigner workers, mainly from Thailand, but not only. And that leaves over 150 people. And as Yuval said, as we know, the majority are civilians, but there are a lot of soldiers as well. So this and the forum of the hostages specific words are that they want to treat everyone the same. They're not separating the soldier from the civilians, from the children, from the elderly. They go together as a group.
Thank you, Shiran. To follow up on some of your points, there is a question from both Nicole Cherniavsky and Michael Kurtz, and it has to do with Hamas being an armed group and not a state, and how efficient is international pressure in achieving the goals discussed. What steps can we take in order to address their violations of international law?
Well, that's a very important question, and of course a very significant complicating factor in any international advocacy effort that is directed towards resolving the situation. So Hamas is not a state, and therefore it is not directly bound by many international law norms and instruments, in the same way that a state like Israel or the United States or the United Kingdom is bound. Having said that, Hamas is bound as an armed group by fundamental norms of international humanitarian law, that is the laws of war. It is also bound, and we have significant precedent in recent decades with relation to other armed groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It is also bound by basic principles of human rights law, and it is certainly bound by international criminal law, namely that the Hamas leadership and also Hamas operatives could be presented before a criminal court, certainly in Israel, but also potentially before the International Criminal Court. So the framing of the issue as an international law issue does raise certain legal risks for Hamas, but more significantly, I would say this is very important when negotiating with countries that support Hamas and allow Hamas certain facilities to operate from. So a country like Qatar that is hosting the leadership of Hamas, by invoking and establishing the international illegality of acts committed by Hamas, this is also preparing the ground for other states to pressurize Qatar to cut all ties with Hamas, to deport the leaders of Hamas, to surrender them to the International Criminal Court. And we hope that this combined effect of applying some legal pressure on Hamas, but significantly higher legal pressure on states that have leverage on Hamas, this could add an additional pressure point that could help us in the effort to release the hostages.
Can I ask Yuval and Shiran maybe to also address, because there are a couple of questions that have arisen, but what is the status of Palestine? In other words, especially with respect to international criminal law, because not everyone is entirely aware of the the prosecution, investigations, and so on at the International Criminal Court. And I think this also relates to the previous work at the clinics that you referred to. Maybe I'll just focus on that question. And there's a question of dual citizenship. In other words, if there's any, that's the second question with respect to many abductees and hostages who might hold dual citizenship.
Right. So maybe I will answer the first, and Shiran could deal with the dual citizenship, although I can also say a few words in that regard. So with regard to Palestine or the Palestinian Authority is in a somewhat different situation than Hamas, although it is not a generally recognized state in international law. It is recognized as a state by a good number of countries. And as a result, it was able to join a number of international treaties, including human rights treaties and including the statute establishing the International Criminal Court. The result of this is that the Palestinian Authority does have human rights obligations, including obligations to try to prevent and investigate cases of enforced disappearance. And in a previous case involving two of the hostages from 2015 that are also persons with disabilities, the clinic had been able to procure a decision by an international committee, the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that found that the Palestinian Authority had violated its legal obligations by not applying the necessary measures to find out about the fate and whereabouts of two of our clients, Mr. Mengistu and Mr. Assaid. And the same legal construct would also apply here, although admittedly at this point in time, it appears that the Palestinian Authority has very limited leverage. However, the other point which Tomer raised is very significant in the sense that the International Criminal Court certainly would have jurisdiction over crimes committed by Hamas by virtue of the fact that the Palestinian Authority has accepted the jurisdiction of the court, and that is a matter that has relevance also for our specific cases. With regard to dual nationality, we are pursuing cases on behalf of individuals who have been abducted at the request of either their families. We represent directly some of the families, or by virtue of the request of the overarching association that supports them, which is the Forum and the Global Initiative for the Hostage Children. For our purposes, it's immaterial whether or not they would have dual nationality. We do not need to meet the critical factor is actually the nationality of the perpetrator, so the location of the violation. Universal human rights would protect all individuals. There are talks, or the fact that some of the hostages are dual nationals is very important in getting other states involved, and we have been also in previous cases, the previous cases that we dealt with. We were quite keen on also involving other states. And of course, when states have their own nationals, they could also appeal to and utilize certain international mechanisms that are available for states. I should say that we are, for instance, collaborating with the Raoul Wallenberg Institute in Canada that is supporting some of the hostages who have dual nationality, and is looking at ways in which other states could also be brought into the legal campaign that we are advancing. I don't know if Shiran, yes, Shiran.
Yeah, I just want to add, it's actually much more related maybe to the first question, but I think it's also part of what you just said, that regarding the number of the hostages and who they are and their nationality, what we also know or was said that Hamas is not the only organization that holds the hostages. There are several, maybe the Jihad and also maybe some private people that took hostages on that day. But when we apply, we apply the Hamas as the organization that basically holds the ground. So he has the responsibility to locate, found, and report about the situation and hopefully bring back all the hostages. So that's about that. And regarding the dual nationality, we were asked to represent so far 21 individuals. Some of them are part of the same family. We have one that there are 4 members of the same family, which is a child and parents and grandparents. And so we don't look at different nationalities when we apply for the different mechanisms of the UN, but we know that, as Yuval said, it's also a way maybe to put pressure on Hamas to give more information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have another question. It's coming from Brazil, the UK, and the US, which indicates to me that this is something that's concerning much of diaspora Jewry, and this has to do with the academic response that we're receiving to this issue. How are we engaging with the academic legal community at universities in the UK, in the US? And is there any way that law can deal with the very real sense of threat that students are feeling on campuses?
Maybe less law, but I think it's important to acknowledge that the heads of universities in Israel, including, of course, the heads, president and rector of the Hebrew University, have taken very, very strong stances and statements with respect to all of these issues. I think there was a statement today that was also distributed. It's not necessarily very public, but it's being sent to heads of universities around the world and in our various networks, and we're expressing all of our concerns in that regard. Again, Yuval is abroad, so but yes, we're concerned about our students, our own students who are in exchange programs, but we're also concerned about Jewish students and the what they're facing in different campuses.
Right. So as I said before, we did go out of our way to sign many international law experts from around the world. Many of them, most of them, I would suppose, not Jewish and not necessarily even pro-Israeli, on the letters that we have issued regarding the hostages. The broader issue about the Israel-Hamas war, of course, raises a lot of tension and concern around the world. Part of our professional responsibility is to engage in those discussions, at least the lawyers, and to try to at least put forward information that we have, both about the facts and also our expertise on the way in which the law has been applied in such very difficult and complicated scenarios. A lot of the legal propositions that we see out there are very, very problematic. Some are also very radical in their approach and proposition. And we do feel that we have some responsibility to counter them, of course, when appropriate. With regard to my specific perspective here in London, I would say that at least the program that I am involved in is a program in which Hebrew University is participating. So here we didn't face actually any problems, and we actually held a discussion with students, all students in the program, about the situation unfolding, and actually the Israeli students feel that this is for them a safe and friendly environment. But outside the four corners of the program, the situation is, of course, much more challenging. And we have seen even the great difficulties that universities here had in issuing any statement which has any substantive content on the situation in Israel, Gaza, which is indicative of the very thin ice on which all of us appear to be walking.
Thank you, Yuval. Does anyone else wish to comment? If not, I'll go to another question that is coming in from various countries, Peru, and I can't tell where the other one is from, but it has to do with the International Criminal Court and whether the International Criminal Court has the jurisdiction to judge Hamas leadership. Can they take action against these crimes?
Yeah, yes, maybe I can take this. So yes, we've heard the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, who has been visiting the region in the last week and holding a press conference in Cairo, and also a short press conference in the Rafah crossing. And he made it very clear that he believes that the court has jurisdiction to apply international criminal law to the atrocities that took place on October 7. He was quite clear that it appears, of course, framing it as a lawyer should, it appears on its face, or that there is preliminary evidence suggesting that Hamas committed serious violations of international law. And on that basis, it appears that at least at this point in time, the prosecutor's position is that he will have jurisdiction to prosecute Hamas officials on the basis that they, as Palestinians, Palestine, the Palestinians being a member state in the court, they've committed crimes in the territory of Palestine or in the territory of Israel. That would suffice for him to exercise jurisdiction. He also, I should say, said that he is also monitoring closely the Israeli military campaign and would require Israel to provide explanations for certain targeting decisions. But he did note that he is aware that Israel is a country that is committed to the rule of law, and that all activities of the IDF are supported and monitored by legal advisors. So I would say that there would be little question that the court has the authority to try the Hamas leadership. There would be, of course, practical questions as to whether they can gain custody over those terrorists and whether they would have sufficient admissible evidence that could link them either directly or through the chain of command to the atrocities of October 7.
And as a follow-up question, Shira asks about whether Israel is going to be accused in the International Criminal Court and how we will respond.
So as I said, Karim Khan has already indicated that he's also monitoring the operation by the IDF and expressed concern about the number of civilian casualties. We also know that the court is looking for many years now into other activities by the IDF in Gaza in previous rounds, specifically in the 2014 Operation Protective Edge. So far, the court has not put forward indictments or arrest warrants, partly because for the court to do so in the case of Israel is more difficult than in the case of Hamas, since the court is operating under what is called the principle of complementarity that prohibits the court to deal with a case that is being investigated or prosecuted by a national legal system. And since Israel is investigating allegations that it had committed violations of international law, the court has to convince itself that these investigations are sham investigations that could be simply ignored. And so far, the court has not been willing to do so. I hope it wouldn't do so here as well, provided, of course, that Israel would continue with its good practice of looking into specific concerns and allegations. On the Hamas side, of course, no such mechanisms exist to begin with. Therefore, the court could proceed directly to investigating and charging perpetrators. Of course, the nature of the alleged violations are also, I would say, not comparable in their severity and moral depravity.
So can I just add to because it's not just procedural, but there is a significant difference between deliberate targeting of civilians. I've said on other occasions, you cannot kidnap a child by mistake. This is something that you have to have full intent to do, and of course also the indiscriminate rocket attacks that we've become accustomed to here in Israel, but they are indiscriminate and as opposed to very, very specific targeting in Gaza, which might be mistaken, which might have a variety of considerations, but very, very different also in substance, I think, with respect to international criminal law and international humanitarian law.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A question from Nadia Gut from our Swiss friends. She writes, thank you so very much for your enormous efforts. How can we assist your work, and how can we assist in finding access to the hostages, if at all? Perhaps Shiran?
Me?
Yeah, well, I think this is actually for Shiran, but yes.
Maybe I'll start, and Shiran can also collect her thoughts. But I will say first, the fact that you're here on this call and that you are expressing support is very important. Also, I would also say that beyond, of course, supporting the work of the university and the clinics, and maybe Shiran could say a bit more on that, there is also networking. I mean, you are the friends and people who are interested in the work of Hebrew University, and specifically people who are following the recent tragedy. Have their own networks who could be quite elaborate and could actually include many professionals, people with access to decision makers that we are simply unaware of. So if you can connect us to such individuals or such agencies that you think could be allies in this important humanitarian endeavor, this will be very highly appreciated. Like I said, this is a very complicated terrain. Sometimes the pressure, sometimes the advocacy is on legal track, but sometimes we would like to involve foreign governments, and you sitting in these foreign countries, many of you are much better placed than us in actually forming the necessary connections. So anyone who has a certain idea or a certain connection that we could then link up with, please let us know. To you, Shiran.
Yeah, thank you, Yuval. So yes, this is one very important aspect, because I'm sure there are things that and people and places that we can approach. So please let us know. The fact that you are here and listening and wanting to know more about our work is also very important. We are now starting to go to the people who were evacuated from their homes and are in hotels to see what we can do regarding their social rights and how we can help them. We are approaching more individual claims for the UN bodies. As we said, we try to think of how to teach human rights in a world that or a situation that is so hard to describe as what we know before. We look on all of the things that we used to do in the legal clinics and trying to think how we will make this academic year happen, because the courts are not back to operate yet. We didn't start the academic year yet. We try to do as much as we can with students who are volunteering and our clinical staff. So any assistance that you can think of, we are more than welcome to hear. We can speak, come and talk like those talks to people you think who may be interested to hear more about our work, and just spread the words that we try to do as much as we can for our community.
Thank you, Shiran. We have quite a few other unanswered excellent questions, but I think that we are beginning to run out of time. So I am going to turn the floor back over to our chairperson, Pamela. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next Hebrew University webinar. Please, Pamela.
Okay, thank you so much, Yuval, Shiran, and Tomer. We are grateful that you took the time this evening to explain your work and to share the incredible work you are all doing. And we in Chutz La'aretz are appreciative, of course, of all your efforts. On behalf of the hostages and their families, we pray for their safe return home and an end to the nightmare and the nightmare of their families. And we thank all of you who have taken time out of your Sundays to join us today. If you are wondering, as some of you have asked, what you can do to help our efforts, the Hebrew University has launched a multi-pronged campaign called the We Are One campaign to assist the students, especially the thousands of Hebrew students who have been called up to serve in Miluim in the reserves, including, as Tomer mentioned, half the law students. Our campaign is also designed to help members of the larger university community, and there are numerous projects underway on various campuses within the university. The law clinics that we heard about today from Shiran all benefit from your contributions. And among other things, the university is also engaged in various projects to aid those from southern Israel who lost everything on October the 7th. For details, please visit the websites of your local friends organizations, such as the AFHU.org for Americans, CFHU.org for Canadians, BFHU, you get the idea. I'm not going to mention them all. I understand there are people here from all around the globe, but if you don't know the appropriate organization in your part of the world, you can visit the university website. I believe it's campaign.huji.ac.il, and that will direct you to your local your local Hebrew University Friends organization. I do want to stress that any contributions will be enormously appreciated in this time of uncertainty and need. Support from friends all over the world can go a long way to help Israel, her institutions, and her citizens in this unprecedented, extraordinarily difficult, and pivotal moment of Israel's history, and help weather the storm. So please give generously. We hope to be able to offer other informational webinars such as these, and you will get notices about them. And I sincerely hope that the next time we see each other, the hostages will have been returned safely to their homes. Until then, thank you again, and I wish you all a peaceful rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.
Godspeed.